Good morning. Today we are going to discuss about Jeremy Bentham's theory. Okay, Jeremy Bentham heralded a new era in the history of legal thought in England. He was considered to be the founder of positivism in the modern sense of the term. We can say that John Austin, though he is called as the father of positivism, actually he is indebted or he owes much to Bentham, because Bentham's classic works reveal that, truly speaking, he should be considered to be the father of analytical positivism and not John Austin as it is commonly believed. Okay, now if you see the history or the life of Bentham, Bentham was the son of a wealthy London attorney. He was a genius he was having a rarest, you can say, quality. His thoughts relating to legislation, his thoughts relating to reforms, you can't challenge it. Okay, he sketched many things about individualism, law and legal reforms which have affected the growth of English law in the positive direction. The contribution of Jeremy Bentham to the English law reforms can be summarized as he determined in the first place the principles on which reform should be based. Means how we have to make reforms, on what basis we can make reforms, what are the principles on which reform should be based. He mentioned that. Okay, he determined that. Secondly, he determined the method, that is the mode of legislation by which reforms should be carried out in England. Means he was an apostle of reforms. He stated how reforms are to be made and on what basis reforms can be made. Okay, now before Bentham, what was there in England? The English law had developed in a very haphazard manner because of customs or the different modes of thought which prevailed at that time, at that particular period. Okay, laws which were then in existence were not enacted on any definite guiding principles behind them. Now when we make law today, we see the objectives, the application, the execution and all, and then we make the law. The laws are properly discussed in the parliament with the aspects of merits and demerits and the problems which may occur at the time of execution. But at that time, like before Bentham, the laws which were then in existence were not enacted with any definite guiding principles behind them. Therefore, law had grown out of occasion, out of emergency. Therefore, the situation at the time of Jeremy Bentham, when he mentioned his principles or his theory, was not proper. Okay, now we will see Bentham's views relating to law. He states that law is imperative. Imperative means compulsory. You have to follow it. Bentham's concept of law is imperative one. That is, law is an assemblage of signs, declarations of volition conceived or adopted by the sovereign in a state. Here you can see that he resembles Austin. Okay, now Austin was in army. The life of an army man he had seen, and therefore with a strict discipline he mentioned that law is a command of sovereign backed by sanction. Okay, while Bentham, how he has mentioned imperative one, Bentham also says the same thing. Law is imperative, compulsory, not to be disobeyed. Same thing is mentioned by Bentham. Bentham's concept of law is imperative one. That is, law is an assemblage of signs, declarations of volition, that is a wish, conceived or adopted by the sovereign in a state. He believed that every law may be considered in the light of 8 different aspects. Means we have to see the source of law. The source of law is what? The will of the sovereign. The subjects, that is on whom the law is applicable, that may be persons or things. The objects, that is the act, the situation or forbearance to do something or not to do something, that is the object of law. Then the extent, means law covers in portion of land on which acts have been done. Means we have to see the extent also, we have to see the scope of law also. Then the aspects, whether it is directive, or whether it is sanctional, whether it is punishable, whether it is compulsory or mandatory or directory, that we have to see. Then he says that about the force, means the binding force of the law. Next is the remedial state, that is what remedies have been provided if the concerned law is been broken, and the formal expression, that is the will of the sovereign, will be expressed. These are the 8 aspects which Bentham has mentioned. Okay, we'll revise. That is the source, subject, object, extent, aspect, force, remedial state and expression. Okay, he says that you have to study law in the light of all these 8 aspects. Bentham was tireless campaigner of reform and insisted that prior to reform there has to be thoroughgoing classification of law. We have to study first what reforms you have to make, whether those reforms will be acceptable by the people or not. That should be checked first, and then only reforms. He was a champion of codified law. Okay, Bentham, I discussed or I stated, he was a tireless campaigner of reform and insisted that prior to reform there has to be classification of law. He was a champion of codified law. He stated that no, law should be codified. Customary practices and all, they are different, and law is different. Law must be codified. And English law reform, which in his view was in a chaos in those days, so he stated that codification becomes essential. He advocated that there would be no reform in substantive law without reforming its structure through the process of analysis. Bentham is also belongs to analytical positivism. He is also positivist because he studies law as it is, law made by the legislature. Okay, therefore he states that whenever you have to make reforms in the substantive law, you can't make it unless the structure is reformed, without reforming its structure through a process of analysis. So the method which Bentham has used is analysis only. He speaks about 2 types of jurisprudence, that is expositorial jurisprudence, which means what law is, where we are going to study what law is, and sensorial jurisprudence, that is what law ought to be, how the law should be. Okay, now Bentham has propounded his theory of utility. Utility means what? Usefulness. And in that theory, what he has mentioned, that man is governed by 2 masters, and those 2 masters, those 2 sovereign masters are the pain and pleasure. Okay, means everything should be calculated based upon pain and pleasure, because man avoids pain and he wants pleasure. Therefore, whenever a law is to be made, we have to see that how it will be effective on the people, whether it will be painful or it will give pleasure to the people. He has given a mathematical computation of pain and pleasure. He says that we can calculate pain and pleasure. Okay, now the basic principle on which Bentham's hedonism is based is what? Greatest good of greatest number, that is greatest happiness of greatest number. Okay, means the government will make laws which will make people happy, and many of the persons should be happy. Greatest happiness of greatest number. Therefore, the function of law must be to meet these ends. And what are the ends? What will make people happy? Subsistence, abundance, equality and security for the citizens. Therefore, law should achieve these objects, these ends. That is to provide these 4 ends of legal regulations. Security will be the most. People want security first. Okay. So, Bentham's theory of utility was very much accepted at his particular time, or after his time it was accepted. Okay, he supported the economic principle of laissez-faire, which means minimum of interference of the state in economic activities. He spoke about individualism. Bentham, as an individualist, believed that the function of law is to emancipate individual from the bondage and restraint of his freedom. Man should be very much free. According to this theory, the right aim of legislation is the carrying out of the principle of utility. The proper end, that is the object of every law, is promotion of greatest happiness of the greatest number. Okay, this is Bentham's theory. Okay, now Bentham is also being criticized. His criticise is based upon what? That you cannot calculate everything based upon pain and pleasure. Bentham's theory of utilitarianism has been subjected to criticism by many on many counts. The main is what? He is trying to blend materialism and idealism together. Bentham underestimates the needs of individual discretion and flexibility in the application of law. He is giving much importance to whom? To the legislator. Secondly, his theory fails to balance individual interest and the interest of the community. Means he is much giving importance to what? Individual rights, or you can say individual interest. Hedonistic calculus, that is the theory of utilitarianism, is that pleasure and pain alone, it cannot be the final test of adequacy of law. Means whether law is adequate or not, that cannot be checked based upon the criteria of pain and pleasure. Other things are very much important. Community interest is very much important. Salus populi est suprema lex, means welfare of the people. Welfare of the people is paramount. Community interest is much important than the individual interest. Okay, Bentham's theory suggests that interest of an unlimited number of individuals shall be conducive to the interest of the community. This, in other words, means that freedom of enterprise will automatically lead to greater equality. Actually, when you practice it, you see that when freedom of economic activities is being given, it results in equality. Therefore, individual freedom in economic matters is being criticized by many. Okay, despite the shortcomings, Bentham has contributed a lot. He has told about legal reforms, how carefully we have to make legal reforms, and in England the legislations were based upon his principles, and much of the laws were codified because of him. Okay, Bentham was in fact the intellectual godfather of John Austin, from whom the latter borrowed, developed and perfected his theory of analytical positivism. Bentham has devoted his whole life to the improvement of the quality of law and life with a view of promoting happiness of the people. But when Bentham was living, it is irony of fate that Bentham's work on law and legislation did not receive much attention during his lifetime, but they were highly appreciated after his death. Okay, that was fate of Bentham. But Bentham has contributed our penology, our ethics, many things which he has mentioned, we follow it, and he gave importance to legislation, and now we see that legislation is the main source of law today. Okay, this is Bentham. Okay, bye bye, see you in the next video.